will keep recording on your end and recording on my end, even if the connection's crap, and then it like marries it up at the end. So if it gets a bit crackly, you get
great. Okay.
list of what I'm saying, just keep talking because it will record my end and your. Okay, so I'll ask that question again.
Sorry.
All of this out.
Yeah, no, okay.
Michelle, I'm really sort of interested to hear what has been the driving forces around your moves with your husband, because obviously a lot of the conversations that we have on this podcast are with the expat scene, and so people bouncing around globally, but your moves have all been internally in Australia, and are quite not unique to Australia, but definitely quite a common story that we hear in rural Australia, which is people moving around, generally driven by the agricultural industry. So do you want to talk through, so you had that, you moved and got married and moved
married,
as a young girl, got to move from out of home, but what has sort of driven the moves and your trailing spouse sort of journey over the years?
Definitely my husband's work, looking for work. So that the first move we made was when the drought hit and our contracting business didn't have the livestock to sustain it. So I convinced John to take on a managing job just 75 k's north of Hay, which is I always describe the place we went to as the poem Hey Helen Bullygall by Banjo Patterson. We were at the hell in the middle. So, and that's, we didn't think it was hell, but that's how that he described it. So around the One Tree Plains. So property in there that, he managed for a few years until it actually got shut down with the drought. So we then stayed living there until we moved the other side of Hay, another 80 k's out the other side of Hay. All this time I was keeping my jobs in town in Hay, so travelling every day with children for school and back. We did have a house in town that we stayed overnight in a few times a week. And during the process, we had children go up to boarding school in Victoria as well. So we went to manage that place and then manage another place near Hay. And then that, after 4 years, finished up as well. And John actually went back shearing when he was 50. And for a few months, and then he got a job in Tasmania, which was a very much will we, won't we situation. I might say that none of our moves have been planned. Everything's happened through circumstances making us change. Anyway, we sat down, or I sat down. John was shearing, and I was ringing him out at the shed to say, will I apply? And he said no. And I said, and then he'd ring back and say yes, and then he'd say no, and eventually said yes. So we applied and we sat down. He actually had a sheet of paper and put a line down the middle, pros and cons, and just worked out what the worst case scenario was if it didn't work out. And we kept our house in Hay, and I took long service leave and we moved to Tasmania. Yeah, so went from the flat plains of Hay to the middle of the Derwent Valley in Tasmania, which was rather claustrophobic to begin with, but glorious in the end. Yeah. And then we were there for about 4.5 years, and then we moved to Victoria, place called Beaufort, between Ararat and Ballarat, which was another job for John. And then we were about there 4.5 years, then back to my old stopping ground where I was born for about 12 months. And then we actually had about 6 weeks in a lovely little house in a small town in between jobs. And then we moved up here to Coolac, and we've been here about 6 years. We've had 3 moves since we've been here. One with the same property. We literally moved across the road a couple of years after we'd moved up here. And then we've just recently, at the start of this year, moved again to another farm where John's managing. So, and I've trailed the whole way.
So tell me, have you actually counted how many houses you've lived in?
I've counted. We've had 12 moves. That's with coming from home, and then we did go back to our house in Hay a couple of times in between the jobs in Hay and going to Tassie. Yeah, so 12. So I'm adamant the next one will be our own place, and that'll be it in a few years. That's it.
So tell me, what were you? So you talked about your job that you were doing in Hay, where you would sometimes stay in town and have the kids going to school and things
Yeah.
in there. What were you doing for work?
I was working at the local Catholic primary school as the secretary, as well as I had 3 jobs actually, the secretary, and I was a teacher's aide as well as a teacher's assistant. So that sort of was 4 days a week. But more than not, I'd have to be in there 5 days because I'd have to take Tim into school anyway. So I'd go in and do a bit of work and then and wait for him because there was no school bus. So yeah, it was that. And I was there about 10 years. As I said, I took long service leave. I just scraped in for that to get to Tassie. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did you, in the other locations, obviously you were able to hold on to that role for a while, but with the other moves, were you able to work?
I was worried when I went to Tassie that everyone said that it was very hard to get jobs down there, hence taking the long service leave. And I just went in with the idea that I'll just apply for anything that I think I can do. And I was really lucky. I got a great job first job I applied for, which within 3 months of me being there, I was working 4 days a week at an all-boys Catholic school for year 7s to 10, just a 45-minute drive from where we were living, which was great. I was really surprised.
And all of the other locations, were you able to pick up work?
Yes, eventually. I've been different schools. I changed a few times when we came back over to Victoria. I was in a hospital in a business office for a while doing sort of spreadsheets and things, and then moved to the front desk of the hospital. And then I went back to a school. I've been to 3 different St Mary's primary schools in different locations. So yeah, went to St Mary's in Ararat, and then when we moved to Hamilton, I went to St Mary's School there too, which was right at the back of the secondary school that I actually went to. So that was a real step back in time. Yeah, yeah. And then when we left there, I came up here and I worked I actually joined your Pointer Remote when I moved up here, and kept an eye on that, but ended up getting a part-time job at an accountant's in Gundagai, which I had for 12 months, I think. I was also doing some cleaning at an accommodation place as well, and they ended up offering me a accommodation manager's position, which was out of the office. I was finally, it was great. I could work partly remotely, which was great. I didn't have the set hours of 9 to 5:30. And I'm still there 6 years later, still doing it. So yeah, it's I just went in with the attitude I would just find whatever I could. I did a bit of farm work when we were at one farm. The company that employed John employed me for a little while to do books. I did a bit of the books over in Tassie as well. So sort of dabbled in a little bit of helping him as well.
So I'm really interested in hearing. I know that the community in Hay is a very sort of welcoming community, and that is so fabulous. I didn't know that they did like a welcome event every January. That's fabulous. But I think the challenge that I know a lot of people find moving into small rural communities in Australia, in other parts of the country, that people can find that absolutely, well, terrifying, but also really challenging, because country towns are quite renowned for the clickiness and we've been here forever sort of mentality, or I've got enough friends and can't be bothered with the new person. Can happen in a lot of towns. How did you find your people? How did you find a network? How did you find sort of like people to sort of start building a tribe in each of these places?
It was quite daunting in Tassie. I felt like I'd established my friendship group and really gotten into the grain of Hay through having children there as well, and met friends that are still my best friends. When we went to Tassie, our children had finished. Our middle son Paddy had finished school, Our eldest daughter had finished school and was heading off to uni, and our youngest son was still at school in Geelong. So they weren't actually living with us. So you didn't have that meeting at the school gate or canteen duty or anything like that. We actually found it really difficult in Tassie. They are a little bit more enclosed. We just decided in the end, a couple of things we did. We went to a cafe in the small town just down the road quite often, on a Saturday morning or something, to just get off the farm and have a conversation. And you meet people through that. Used to take our dog with us, which was a bit of a draw card as well. And also pick up they had a community newsletter which they wrote, so just for our small community, which I picked up and got a few pointers and things out of that. John always goes to the pub for a beer, so he goes and gets talks to the old guys there and gets a bit of a brains trust, he calls it, to get the lay of the land, because he knew nothing about the land over there, obviously. The biggest thing we did was actually realise that people weren't going to come to us. We didn't have anyone knock on the door with a cake and say, welcome to the area or anything. I don't think anyone knew we were there. We were one of very, very few company-owned places in Tassie. They were all very family-owned still. And what we did was we got the community newsletter, and there was a meeting for the local town, smaller town show committee. So we'd been involved a little bit with the show and that in Hay and other things. So we just bit the bullet and just turned up at the meeting, basically, introduced ourselves, and got, fortunately for us, they had the people that had been doing the barbecue for years and years and years just were retiring that year. So we stuck our hands up and said we'd organise that. So took on a fairly daunting task to begin with, but from then on, we didn't look back. It was amazing. They just embraced us and could see we were good people and we wanted to help the community, and had the best set of friends there ever. Yeah. Funny story. We actually met the neighbours that we could see out our front window, which were across the highway and on another hill. We met them at our daughter's university at UNE in England. They were up there. Their son was up there. And my daughter was involved with the rugby team, and he was playing, and we actually ran into them and worked out. I think I'm not really sure how it happened. Claire might have realised that he was from Tassie or something, and they were there seeing him. So yeah, we actually met them, and best friends still.
So
Crazy.
To give listeners a bit of a geography lesson on that, so Tasmania is the little island right down the bottom of Australia, and the University of New England is in northern New South Wales, which is about a third of the country further north. It's a long, we're talking
it's 40
thousands of kilometres.
Yes. Yeah. So that was luck. We were supposed to meet them, and we were, and John did things. He went in and played tennis in Hobart every Tuesday night. It was the best thing. They had a group of men that just used to take a picnic basket and have a barbecue and play tennis, they tell us, but I think they did. Good catch up. And look, I also ended up getting asked to join a book club, which I absolutely loved. It was just such a great mix of people that and conversation and stuff. Wasn't always the book, but it was just wonderful and very invigorating, and they were great friends to have. And I don't think we've actually ever had the same welcome or set of friends since. We've sort of haven't been able to get involved in the community and that in the other places that we've been in as much as what we did over there. It was
we actually have a fair few of our listeners. I always find it really interesting having a look at the analytics on the back end of the podcast, and we do have a lot of listeners that listen from Australia. I think that someone like you, that you've spent over 35 years moving around towns in rural communities, do you have some advice? Because I know that we also have actually a fair few medical trailing spouses that listen, and they quite often find themselves in rural communities, particularly Australian ones, as and also for foreign trained medical professionals who come to countries like Australia to get their permanent residency or to get their visa, a lot of the time they've got to spend time in rural communities. So have you got sort of advice that is in addition to what you were saying, is that no one's going to come to you, so you've got to put yourself out there? Any other little gold nuggets that you can share that would be helpful for people that are either about to do this? I know we've got some really interesting people moving around that have joined the trailing spouse community that are relocating from other parts of the world into medical jobs in Australia.
Australia.
Yeah. So any advice that you can pass on for them?
Well, accept any invitations that you get. I think most rural communities will put something out there, or they'll, especially if they're welcoming a medical. If you're getting a doctor to a small town, people are going to be overjoyed that they're coming to start with, and they'll touch base with you. You know, they'll ask you out. If you, as I said before, if you've got children, if you've got young children, that school, preschool, childcare will give you a connection. If you don't, it is harder. I think it is harder. I think sport probably. John always says, said to the kids, if you take your tennis racket and turn up in a town and at the courts, you'll get a game and you'll meet people. And you know, that sort of thing. If you do that, the other thing was we didn't really meet a lot of people through it, but we did go to church as well. Not that we're really religious, but that connection with Catholic Church and through working through Catholic schools, I met people that way as well. But small rural communities will have huge sporting clubs and things like that. The other thing is go down to the local cafe when you've got time off and sit out the front and have a coffee, and you'll be surprised how many people will walk past and say hello, especially if you've got a cute dog or a baby with you. But even if you don't, that was one thing that we did and we still have done more to get off, because managing farms, you're working where you live. So John's always worked where he lives. So you're never away from work unless you actually leave and go somewhere else. And so we would do that just to give him a breathing space and go and have a look around your town, you know, walk around your town, go into the shops and say hello, buy the local newspaper, see what's happening, and just, do something that appeals to you. You do have to put yourself out there. You can't sit back and expect people to come to you.
Okay, so if you don't have kids, buy a cute dog. That's the main takeaway that I've got from that. But I think that concept of going to the cafe on a regular basis is such a good one, because one, even if the only person that you're seeing on a regular basis is the person making your coffee, but you're sitting out the front of the cafe, especially if you're quite strategic and you sit on the street and you've got the cute dog, people will be like, oh, I saw you 2 weeks ago, or I saw you, like, I've seen you a number of times now, you must live here. And then they might say, oh, okay, like, hi, or you can do the nod. I don't know if that's just an Australian thing, but like, you know, just tilting your head and nodding at people.
And, you know, be friendly to people. Like most of the time, the cafe you go to, the owners will be locals. So they'll be involved in things as well, and they'll see the people, you know, see that you're new and ask you to do different things, or you know, even just having that connection with that one person, can make a huge difference. Yeah.
Is there something that 15 or 20-year-old Michelle wishes that she'd known before she'd embarked on this farming,
I would
spouse life?
I wouldn't change anything at all. I you know, we've got unique experience that a lot of people would never get the opportunity to do. And the only thing I think, and we just went with the flow. As I said, what the changes and the moves we had weren't things that we planned. They were circumstance that we had to do right from the start. And I think it'd be maybe if I would plan, I would have a bit more of a plan. Yeah. And a mud map even would have been great. But you know, we've got through, and I'm planning now. for the next few years. I'm that's what we're doing. We've done our bit with the managing and that, and we were on to our next leg in a few years' time. So getting the planning done now. Other than that, no, I did everything I wanted to do. It was very, very, I found it quite lonely in Hay in the very beginning. That first few months, John went off to work and I had the house, was tiny, it was clean really quickly. I started hairdressing there and had the most beautiful experience working with the most gorgeous people there, and met my best friend. We had babies a day apart, so still really great friends. So, and that the other thing I tell myself too, you go to, when we went to Tassie, I felt like I'd lost all my network and I didn't have any friends. But I then realized that I did have really great friends. They just weren't at my back door anymore. And I just needed to make the effort to keep that connection going, which I did with numerous things, one of which was a very boring long Christmas letter every year to everyone that was back home. But pre Facebook and Instagram and all of that, I spent a bit of time doing that for quite a number of years, and just made the effort to see them. And you know what, when you're working full-time, or I was part-time, John was full-time, and you're in the same town, you don't always see each other that often anyway. So the times that we did get to spend together were actually with really, we connected really well, because we weren't rushing off to work, or it wasn't 5 minutes here or there. We actually planned weekends away and stuff like that to keep in contact with really good friends. Yeah. You're not alone. You just have people further away, I think. Yeah.
And you do friendship in a different way, I think, as well. And it makes you much better on the phone too.
Yes, definitely. And I really believe if I have a thought come into my head of someone, I'll send them a text. I don't always ring, but I'll give them a quick text and just say, I love heart, or how you doing, or something like that, just to keep in contact. I really feel I try and do that every time, because sometimes you just get an overwhelming thoughts of one person, and a lot of the time I've done that. I've ended up in conversation with them because they've needed to have a chat, or I have, vice versa. Yeah, you just have to trust your instincts and do those sorts of things as well. Make time to do those sorts of things. Yeah.
That is completely, you've just described me as well. And I've actually heard my husband on a number of times when he's thought I've not been in earshot, and I've heard him say to people, he's like, oh, Joe's really good at that. Like, we'll literally be talking about someone, and he gets initially annoyed with me because I'll pull my phone out, but I will just flick that person that we've been talking about, or I've thought about it or something. And quite often that, like, a week later you'll get a call and you have a big long chat for a long time. But I think that is a very, very good piece of advice, and a really, really clever way of staying in touch and feeling connected, especially if you're relatively mobile. Like, you've done a fair bit of moving around in that time, but then it sounds like there've been good chunks of time though, like 4, 6 years, like 10 years, like those are
some were, yes. Yeah, some were a bit shorter, 12 months in Branksholme, and only a short time probably out at the first property that we were on. But we actually stayed and lived there to save moving twice and look after the house for them after John finished work, and he just did a bit of contracting and stuff in between. There's been a few fill-in between jobs, but thankfully only one fill-in between house, which was in Viaduct for about, I think we were there for 6 weeks. And then moved up here. The other thing in Hay was that I had good support. I didn't have any of my family there. Some of John's family were there, so good sister-in-laws and great friends. And we used to tag team with our kids. We've got 3 children, and I had them all within 3 years. And you just drop, if you had to go, Griffith was our main shopping, and it was an hour and a half away one way. So if you had an appointment or something, you'd mind their children while they went for the day, and then they'd do them for you. It was I couldn't have survived without that. I being able, because it was only half a day of childcare a week offered in Hay at that time. So anyone under preschool age, that was all you had. And pre-mobile phones and things like that too. So it was you needed that extra support, and we just trusted each other with each other's children, and helped each other out as much as we could. Yeah, it worked really well.
It's very much that it takes a village to raise raise kids mentality.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
it's been so nice to sort of hear your perspective, which is quite different to the conversations that I've been having of late, and I'm really pleased to have got to share your story. Is there anything that you'd sort of like to wrap it up with?
In it's been a wonderful journey. It really has. And I mean, we're still on it, but I suppose the pros and cons thing was the thing that got me through, and actually made us make the decision, which was really hard, to leave Hay and to go to Tassie. But I always think, work out your worst case scenario with what could happen if you do move, and how you financially would get out of it, etc., etc. And if you think you can cope with that, there's no reason why you shouldn't do it. And it just, John's had an amazing experience. So have I. I've met so many people and done so many different things, and retrained in so many different things as well. A lot of, each computer program was different, and all of that, which is very stimulating. Yeah, it is. So yeah, just trust your guts and go with it, basically.
Although I was just about to wrap you up, but you've just made a really interesting point there that I think what that idea of sometimes dreading that almost reinvention every time that you're moving jobs wise, especially because you moved away from your trade, which I'm sure if you'd wanted to, you could pick up a hairdressing gig in every town that you wanted to.
I used to do them at home, haircuts at home. And that was the other thing that went when we moved to Tassie, like, you didn't have that network anymore. So I lost that cash income too. That was our holiday money. I did a few over there, but not many. But yeah, it's you know you're a good person, and you know that you've been trusted, and people knew who we were when we were in Hay. And when we moved, no, you had to prove all that all over again. And it takes a while. It takes a lot of thought and a lot of actions to get people to actually come to that level again, and understand that you are a good person, and you can do these things. And yeah, you're good fun to be around, or whatever. They can be a little bit guarded at times. But that was probably one of the hardest things, was going from somewhere where everyone knew you. Grocery shopping was so much quicker in Tassie. Once we found the grocery store, which was actually, we were going to one that was a lot further away than the one that we should have been going to. It took nearly 2 weeks to realise, but it was a lot quicker. And the walk down the street was, a lot quicker, and all of that, because in Hay you'd just be talking to everybody all the time, which was lovely. And that took a long time to get used to, and it changed. It did change, but you have to make it change too. Yeah. And just, proving yourself to other people again is tough, over and over.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been a real treat.
A little bit different to what I've been listening to the podcast. It's been a little bit different, but as I said, it was a lightning bolt for me. I didn't realise that trailing spouse was exactly what I'd done.
Yeah, very much.
Good on you for the podcast. It's been great. I'm still listening. Still got quite a few to go, and I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, well, I'm just so pleased that because it seems like you would think that they are worlds apart, of being the wife of a farm manager to the spouse of, say, an investment banker in Hong Kong. Like, you would think they would be two entirely different worlds, but you have just, reiterated so many of the same sort of challenges and exciting things, and so many of there's so many more similarities between those two situations than you would think. And I think, like, this conversation has well and truly proved that. So thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jo. Keep it up. It's I'll look forward to all the new podcasts coming out.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Jo.